My father raised his glass, and the basement went quiet the way it always did when he was about to speak. 30 people packed into that finished lower level with the pool table shoved against the wall, and the mounted largemouth bass nobody had dusted since 2019. Aunt Patrice had her hand on Uncle Richard's knee. My sister April was leaning into her husband Greg's shoulder, their 2-year-old asleep in the pack-and-play behind the couch. My mother stood near the stairs holding a tray of her cranberry meatballs, smiling the way she smiled when she wanted everyone to see her smiling. I was standing near the mini fridge with a glass of white wine I had barely touched, wearing a green dress I had bought specifically for tonight because last year, my mother mentioned I looked tired at Christmas. "Another year," my father started. He had this deep voice that filled a room even when he was not trying. "Another good year for this family. Greg, April, that grandbaby of mine. Richard, Patrice, you made it down from Cleveland. That means a lot." He went around the room, naming people, thanking them. My father was good at this, the performance of warmth, the annual moment where he stood at the center and everyone listened. I watched him and I loved him the way you love someone whose approval you stopped expecting but never stopped wanting. Then he looked at me. "And Lucy." He paused. The pause was the first warning. "Still holding down the fort solo, huh? What is it now, 37? He shook his head slowly, not angry. Just this sad, amused look, like he was watching a dog try to open a door. "Just you and your regrets this new year, kiddo. Maybe next year, right? Maybe next year you'll have some news for us." A few people laughed. My cousin Derek, Uncle Richard. Not mean laughter exactly, but the kind that fills the space when nobody wants to sit in what was actually just said. My mother looked at the meatball tray. April looked at her phone. My face went hot, starting at my neck and climbing. I felt it in my ears, this prickling heat that made the room feel smaller and brighter. I took a sip of wine that I did not taste, and I smiled, because that is what I have always done. I smiled and I made myself smaller, and I waited for him to move on to someone else. He did. He moved on to talking about the Ohio State game last week, and just like that, the room came back to life, and I was standing there with my wine and my green dress and my 37 years of being not quite enough for the man who was supposed to love me without conditions. I stayed another 40 minutes. I carried plates to the kitchen. I rinsed serving dishes and wrapped up leftover ham and loaded the dishwasher while my mother talked to Aunt Patrice about a show on Netflix. I did what I always did. I made myself useful so that no one would look at me with pity, or worse, agreement. When I finally said my goodbyes, my father was sitting in his recliner with his feet up, watching the ball drop on the big screen. "Drive safe, Luce," he called out without looking up. Like he had not just taken a piece of me apart in front of everyone and set it on the floor. I sat in my Honda in the driveway for 8 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard change. The engine was running. The heater was blowing dry air against my face. Ice was forming on the edges of the windshield in those feathered patterns that look almost pretty if you are not sitting in your parents' driveway at 11:47 on New Year's Eve, trying to figure out when your father started seeing you as a problem instead of a person. I pulled out of the driveway at 11:55. I did not make it to midnight in any room with anyone. I drove through empty Columbus streets with the radio off, watching traffic lights change for nobody. And I did not cry because I had gotten very good at that. At not crying. At driving home from my parents' house and calling it fine. My apartment smelled like the candle I had lit before leaving. The one that was supposed to make the place feel like someone was coming home to it. Pine and cedar. $12 at Target. I stood in the doorway with my coat still on and my keys still in my hand, and I looked at the candle burning on the kitchen counter and I thought about how I had set it up like a stage for a life that was supposed to feel full. I sat on the couch. I did not take off my coat. I texted Dana, my best friend since our MSW program at Ohio State. Survived another one. 3 dots. Then, how bad? Scale of 1 to 10, solid 7. He worked me into the toast this year. The toast? Like in front of everyone? In front of everyone. Dana called. I picked up and told her a version of the story where I rolled my eyes and it was mostly funny. I told her about the green dress and the mounted fish and the way Uncle Richard laughed like it was a late-night monologue. I did the bit where I imitated my father's voice, the way I always do, making him sound like a sitcom dad instead of what he actually is. I left out the part where I washed dishes for 20 minutes so I would not have to stand still. I left out the part where I sat in my car watching the clock. I left out the part where my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Lucy, you don't have to keep going to these things. It's New Year's, it's family. It's cruelty in a turtleneck and khakis. I laughed because Dana was right and because laughing was easier than the other thing. We talked for another 15 minutes about nothing important, and then I brushed my teeth and I got into bed and I stared at the ceiling and I ran his words again. Still single. Just you and your regrets. Maybe next year. Here is the thing I did not tell Dana. It was not the first time. 2 Thanksgivings ago, standing in my parents' kitchen, my father looked at me over the turkey platter and told April's husband Greg that he always wanted a son. But we got Lucy instead, and she's not even close to giving me a son-in-law. He laughed like it was a punchline. Greg looked at the floor. At April's wedding 5 years ago, during his father of the bride speech, my father looked at me in the second row and worked in a line about how at least one of his daughters figured it out. The room laughed. I was 32. I was sitting alone at the family table and I was wearing a dress I could not afford because I thought maybe he would look at me and see something worth being proud of. At a 4th of July barbecue when I was 29, my father introduced me to his neighbor's son, right in front of me. This is my Lucy. She's available. Like I was a parking spot. Every time I did the same thing. I found the translation. He just wants me to be happy. He does not know how to say it right. He grew up in a house where love was not spoken, so he shows it sideways, through teasing, through pressure, through standards that feel impossible because he believes I can meet them. That was the story I had been writing about my father for as long as I could remember. He loves me in his way. His way is just rough. I believed it because I needed to. Because the alternative was that the man who taught me to ride a bike and drove me to every swim meet and cried when I got into Ohio State genuinely thought I was not enough. And if I let that in, I did not know what would be left of the story I had built between us. So I swallowed it. Every time. I turned cruelty into concern. I turned public humiliation into awkward love. I turned 37 years of being measured against a life I did not choose into evidence that he cared. I turned off the lamp. The pine and cedar candle was still burning in the kitchen, but I did not get up to blow it out. I lay in the dark in Columbus, Ohio, on the first night of a new year, and I told myself the same thing I always told myself after a night like this. He did not mean it. Except this time, lying there, I could not make the words land. They floated above me like something I used to believe in, and I watched them hang there, and I did not reach for them. January 2nd was a Wednesday, and I went back to work because that is what you do. You get up, you drive your Honda through streets that still have Christmas lights in the windows. You park in the lot behind the community health center, and you walk through the side entrance, and you put your bag in the break room where the fluorescent light has been buzzing since October, and nobody has fixed it. I am a social worker. I have been at the Linden Community Health Center for 9 years. I help people fill out housing applications and Medicaid paperwork and food assistance forms. I sit across from mothers who have not slept in 2 days, and I listen to them tell me things they have not told anyone. And I do not flinch, and I do not judge, and I help them find the next thing. The next appointment. The next document. The next small step that makes the impossible feel like it might have a door. That morning, I sat with a woman named Keisha who was 24 and had 2 kids and was trying to get into a transitional housing program on the east side. She had all her paperwork in a gallon Ziploc bag, organized by color-coded sticky notes. She had done more work preparing for this meeting than most people do for a job interview. I walked her through every form. I made 3 phone calls on her behalf. I flagged her application as priority because she had been on a waiting list for 4 months and she was currently staying with her sister in a 2-bedroom apartment with 6 people. When she left, she stopped at the door and turned around. "You're good at this. Thank you." I smiled. "Just doing my job, Keisha." But it was not just my job. It was the thing I was good at. The thing I had built. 9 years of showing up, learning the system, knowing which case managers returned calls and which ones needed a follow-up email and a CC to their supervisor. I had colleagues who respected me. I had clients who asked for me by name. I had a professional life that made sense. And none of it mattered in my father's basement on New Year's Eve. That was the part I kept circling back to. I could sit across from a woman in crisis and be exactly the person she needed. I could hold a room at a staff meeting. I could negotiate with county housing on behalf of a family and win. But in my father's eyes, I was still the daughter who had not produced a husband, and every accomplishment I carried into that basement dissolved the second he opened his mouth. My coworker Jess found me in the break room that afternoon. She was eating a cup of yogurt and scrolling her phone, and she looked up when I walked in. "How was your new year?" I poured coffee into the mug I keep at work, the one with the chipped handle that says "World's Okayest Social Worker." "Same old. Dad made his annual toast." I survived. Jess put her yogurt down. "The toast. What did he say this time?" I told her. I tried to make it light. I did the voice again. I shrugged. Jess did not laugh. She looked at me the way I look at my clients when they minimize something that should not be minimized, and I saw my own face reflected in her expression, the softening around the eyes, the careful pause before speaking. "Lucy, that's awful. It's just how he is. That doesn't make it okay." I took my coffee back to my desk and I sat there for a while looking at the stack of case files and feeling the strange, dizzy vertigo of hearing someone name a thing you have been calling by a softer name for years. That evening, my mother called. I was driving home, the phone connected to the car's Bluetooth, her voice filling the Honda like she was sitting in the passenger seat. "I just wanted to check on you, sweetheart. You seemed quiet last night." "I'm fine, Mom. Your father didn't mean to upset you. You know how he gets. He's from a different generation. He just worries about you." "I know. He loves you, Lucy. He just doesn't always say it the right way." I wanted to ask her what the right way looked like. I wanted to ask her if she heard what he said, and if she did, why she looked at the meatball tray instead of at him. I wanted to ask her when she started being his translator instead of my protector. I did not ask any of those things. I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, and I sat in the dark with the engine running and her voice in my ears, and I let her smooth it over the way she always smooths it over, like she is ironing a wrinkle out of a shirt that is actually on fire. "Thanks, Mom. I'm fine. Talk soon." I hung up. I sat there for another minute. Then I went inside and ate cereal standing at the kitchen counter, and I thought about how tired I was. Not sleepy tired. The other kind. The kind where your body works fine, but something behind your ribs has been carrying a weight so long it forgot it was heavy. Mara texted me on a Thursday, 9 days after New Year's. We were not close in the way people mean when they say close. We were close in the way cousins are when they grew up at the same family gatherings and shared a bathroom during Thanksgiving sleepovers, and once got caught stealing cookies from Grandma's kitchen at 2 a.m. Mara was 3 years younger than me, lived in Westerville, worked as a dental hygienist, and had a husband named Phil who was fine. That was how she described him. "Phil is fine. He is fine." Her text was simple. "Can we get lunch this week? I want to catch up." I almost said no. I had case reviews stacked through Friday and a court hearing on Monday to prep for. But something about the timing made me say yes. She had been at the party. She had been standing near the pool table when my father made his toast. I remembered seeing her face from across the room, the way it went still, the way she looked at me like she was watching something break. We met at a diner near my office, the kind with laminated menus and coffee that comes in those thick ceramic mugs. Mara was already in a booth when I got there, peeling the wrapper off a straw with small, precise movements. "Hey, Luce." I slid in across from her. "Hey." We ordered. Mara got a grilled cheese. I got soup because I was not really hungry, but I needed something to hold. We talked about Phil, who had started doing home brewing in their garage, and apparently the whole house smelled like hops. We talked about her work, a patient who fainted during a cleaning. We talked about nothing for 10 minutes, and I could feel her circling something, coming closer and pulling back, the way a person does when they have something hard to say, and they are trying to figure out which door to use. "I saw you at the party," she finally said. She put her straw wrapper down and looked at me straight. "I saw the whole toast." "Yeah, classic Dad." "It was hard to watch, Lucy." I shrugged. The reflex. "It's fine. He's always like that." "That's what I want to talk about." She paused. Her fingers were flat on the table, pressing into the formica like she was steadying herself. "It's not just the toast." My stomach did something. A small cold tightening. "What do you mean?" Mara took a breath. "After the party, I stayed late to help Aunt Karen clean up. Your parents had already left. And Aunt Patrice was talking to Uncle Richard in the kitchen, and they were talking about you." I picked up my spoon, put it down. "People talk." They were repeating things your dad said to them, not at the party, before, over the phone over the last couple of years. And the things they were saying, Lucy. She stopped. She looked at the table. "What things?" "I don't want to be the person who..." She trailed off. Her eyes were wet. Mara was not a crier. She was the cousin who made dark jokes at funerals and once told off a rude waiter in front of his manager without blinking. Seeing her eyes get wet was like watching a wall develop a crack. "Mara, what did they say?" She shook her head slowly. "Not here. Not like this. I don't want to just dump it on you in a diner and then you have to go back to work. You can't hint at something like that and then not tell me." "I know, and I will. I just want you to be ready because it's not what you think it is. It's not just him being awkward or old-fashioned or whatever excuse your mom gives." I stared at her. The soup was getting cold. The diner was loud with lunch noise, silverware clinking, and the register beeping, and someone laughing in a booth behind us. And everything sounded like it was happening behind glass. "Is it bad?" Mara looked at me with the kind of steady gentleness that told me she had already decided how she felt about what she knew. "It's worse than the toast, Lucy." I did not push. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to grab her arm and say, "Tell me right now, every word, I can take it." But there was another part, older and quieter, that already knew the shape of what she was going to tell me. Not the details, not the exact words, but the shape. The feeling of something you have suspected for so long that hearing it confirmed is less a surprise than a door opening onto a room you have been standing outside of for years, pressing your ear to the wall. We finished lunch. Mara squeezed my hand across the table. "Call me when you're ready. I'll tell you everything." I drove back to work. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, the leather creaking under my grip. I parked and I sat in the lot for a moment and I thought about the word worse. I thought about all the translations I had built, all the softer names I had given to the things my father did and said. I was afraid, not of what Mara would tell me. I was afraid that once I heard it, I would not be able to go back to the version of my father I had been carrying around like a photo in my wallet, the one where he was rough but loving, difficult but mine. I was afraid that the photo would not survive whatever Mara knew. And I was right to be afraid. I waited 6 days before I called her. 6 days of going to work and helping people fill out forms and drinking coffee from my chipped mug, and driving home and eating dinner alone and lying in bed wondering if I really wanted to know. 6 days of my mother texting me normal things, a recipe for chicken soup, a photo of the neighbor's new puppy, a reminder that my father's birthday was coming up in March. 6 days of my father not texting me at all, which was normal because my father did not text. He existed in rooms. He filled them or he left them, and either way you felt it. On a Tuesday evening, I sat on my couch with my coat still on, the apartment quiet, and I called Mara. "I'm ready." She did not ask if I was sure. She just said, "Can you come over? I don't want to do this on the phone." I drove to Westerville, 22 minutes on the highway. Phil's car was gone. The garage door was open and I could see the homebrew setup on a folding table, the glass carboys and the tubes and the whole operation. I thought about how some people have hobbies that take up space in garages, and some people have fathers who take up space in their chests, and neither one really leaves room for anything else. Mara let me in. She had made tea, which was not a Mara thing to do, and that told me more about what was coming than anything she could have said. We sat at her kitchen table. The tea sat between us untouched. How far back do you want me to go? All of it. She nodded. She folded her hands on the table and she started talking. The first time I heard it was at Grandma's 80th birthday. 4 years ago. Your parents were there, obviously. You weren't because you were at that conference in Indianapolis. After dinner, I was helping clear the table and your dad was in the living room talking to Uncle Richard and Aunt Patrice. I wasn't trying to listen. I was just there. She paused, picked up her tea, put it down without drinking. He was talking about you, about how worried he was. And at first it sounded like normal parent stuff, you know? My daughter's 33 and she hasn't figured out the relationship thing. But then he started saying things that were different. Different how? He told them something is wrong with Lucy. Those words, something is wrong with her. He told them he thought you were broken in some way that he couldn't fix. That he and your mom had tried everything, setting you up with people, encouraging you to go to church events, dropping hints, and nothing worked. And he was embarrassed. The word embarrassed hit me in the sternum. I felt it physically. A small, sharp pressure right behind the bone. That was 4 years ago, Mara continued. But Aunt Patrice told me it wasn't the first conversation like that. She told me your dad had been calling her about you for years. Years, Lucy. Checking in, she called it. Like a status report. Has Lucy met anyone? Is Lucy still alone? What do we do about Lucy? I was very still. The kitchen was warm. There was a clock on Mara's wall shaped like a rooster, the kind you buy at a craft fair, and its tail was the second hand and it kept moving and moving and moving. There's more, Mara said quietly. Tell me. At Thanksgiving this past year, before you and April arrived, your dad was in the kitchen with Aunt Patrice, and he was talking about April's family, about how proud he was of Greg, about the baby. And then he shifted to you and he said, April turned out fine. Lucy is the one we worry about. He told Patrice that he didn't know where they went wrong with you. Like you were a recipe that didn't rise. Like you were a project with bad results. I looked at my hands. They were flat on the table. I could see the veins running under the skin. I could see the small scar on my left thumb from when I cut myself slicing bread in this kitchen 2 Christmases ago, when everything was simpler, or at least when I thought it was. And then, Mara paused, and her voice went careful, like she was handling something that might break. Patrice told me that your dad once told her, and I'm going to say this exactly how she said it to me. He told her, she'll end up alone and it'll be her own fault. I don't know what's wrong with her, but I've given up trying to fix it. The rooster clock ticked. The tea was cold. I was sitting in my cousin's kitchen in Westerville, Ohio, and the photo I had been carrying in my wallet, the one of my father as a rough but loving man, a difficult but devoted dad, was curling at the edges and catching fire. It was not one bad night. It was not one awkward toast. My father had built a narrative about me and distributed it to the family like a newsletter. He had been telling people I was broken for years. Behind my back, in kitchens and living rooms and phone calls I was never part of, he had been constructing a version of me that was defective, incomplete, a problem to be solved or given up on. And I had been showing up to every holiday and every dinner and every gathering with my green dresses and my good behavior and my willingness to wash the dishes and carry the plates, auditioning for a man who had already decided I had failed. Mara reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. How long have you known? The 80th birthday. 4 years. Why now? Because I watched him say it to your face at New Year's, and I watched you smile, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't watch you keep being kind to someone who is not kind about you when you're not in the room. I drove home from Mara's house that night, and I did not turn on the radio, and I did not call Dana, and I did not cry. I pulled into my parking spot, and I sat in the dark, and I thought about every translation I had ever made. He worries about me. He just wants me to be happy. He doesn't know how to say it right. None of them were true. They never were. I had been writing a love story about my father, and he had been writing a tragedy about me, and the only person who didn't know was me. The next few days were like living inside a house where someone had moved all the furniture 2 inches to the left. Everything looked the same, but nothing fit the way it used to. I went to work. I smiled at my clients. I ate lunch in the break room with Jess and talked about a new county voucher program. I did all of it while carrying this new knowledge like a stone in my coat pocket. Heavy and smooth and impossible to put down. I started seeing things differently. The Christmas when I was 26 and my father gave April a necklace from a jewelry store downtown and gave me a gift card to Bath & Body Works. I had told myself he was just bad at shopping. Now I wondered if he had already started sorting us, the good daughter and the one who worried him, the time he skipped my college graduation ceremony because he had a cold. My mother came alone and took photos, and he called that night and told me congratulations, and I told myself he was genuinely sick. Now I remembered that 3 weeks later, he drove 4 hours to watch April play in a high school volleyball tournament with a worse cold and a pulled hamstring. The way he always introduced April first. These are my girls. April and her husband Greg, they live in Dublin. And this is Lucy. No descriptor, no pride. Just a name and a pause that said the rest. I had spent years furnishing these memories with softer explanations. Now the explanations were gone and the rooms were bare, and I could see the walls for what they were. On Saturday, I was supposed to go to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. My mother had texted the details Friday night. Pot roast, 6 o'clock. Your father picked up a pie from that bakery you like. The normalcy of it made my throat tight. She texted like nothing had happened. She texted like the world had not shifted under my feet 4 days ago in Mara's kitchen. I picked up my phone Saturday afternoon and typed, "Hey Mom, I can't make it tomorrow. Busy with work stuff." The 3 dots appeared immediately. My mother was a fast responder. It was one of her defining characteristics, the speed with which she could smooth, redirect, and manage. "What work stuff? It's Sunday, Lucy." "Case reviews. I'm behind." "Your father will be disappointed." I stared at that sentence. Your father will be disappointed. She used his feelings like weather reports, inevitable conditions I was expected to dress for. I had been dressing for his disappointment my whole life. Heavy coat, thick skin, smile on. Walk into the storm and pretend it was sunshine. I typed, "I'll make it next time." I put my phone on the counter face down. She called. I let it ring 4 times, then picked up because the guilt was an old muscle and it still worked. "Lucy, what's going on? You never miss Sunday dinner." "I'm just tired, Mom. I need a weekend to myself." "Is this about New Year's? Because I talked to your father about that and he feels terrible." He feels terrible. Another translation. Another coat of paint over whatever was actually true. I wanted to ask, did he tell you he feels terrible, or did you decide that on his behalf because it is easier than admitting what he actually feels? "It's not about New Year's," I lied. "I just need a break." There was a pause on the phone, the kind where you can hear someone recalibrating. "Lucy, family is family. You can't just take breaks from people who love you." And there it was. The equation she had been running since I was old enough to notice. Family equals obligation. Love equals showing up no matter how you are treated. And any boundary, any pulled back hand, any small no was a betrayal of the whole system. "I know, Mom. I'll see you guys soon." I hung up and I stood in my kitchen and I felt the small, sharp cost of that one tiny no. It was not a confrontation. It was not a scene. It was one canceled dinner. But my hands were shaking and my chest was tight and I felt like I had just pushed a boulder 1 inch up a hill. I sat on my couch and I opened my phone and I searched for therapists in Columbus who took my insurance. I scrolled through profiles. I read bios that sounded kind and professional and vaguely interchangeable. I found one named Dr. Wayes, whose photo looked like a woman who had heard things worse than what I had to say, and I made an appointment for the following Thursday. It was the first appointment I had ever made for myself that was not about helping someone else. Not a client, not a colleague, not a friend in crisis. Just me, sitting on my own couch, deciding that whatever I had been carrying was heavy enough to deserve a room and a chair and an hour where someone listened to me the way I listened to everyone else. I closed my laptop and I looked at the candle on my kitchen counter, the pine and cedar one I had bought for New Year's Eve. It had burned down to a pool of wax with the wick barely visible. I threw it away. I did not replace it. 3 weeks after New Year's, my parents' 38th wedding anniversary dinner arrived like a bill I had been hoping would get lost in the mail. My mother had planned it at Marcella's, the Italian restaurant on High Street, where they had been going for every anniversary since I was in middle school. She had invited April and Greg, Uncle Richard and Aunt Patrice, and a few family friends, the kind of people who had known me since I wore braces and still called me Little Lucy, even though I was 37 and had a master's degree and 9 years of professional experience. The invitation came through the family group chat. My mother had posted it like a press release. Celebrating 38 wonderful years, Saturday at 7 p.m. Please come celebrate with us. I thought about not going. I sat in Dr. Weiss's office on Thursday and told her about the dinner, and she asked me what I was afraid of. I told her I was afraid of sitting at that table and watching my father perform the loving patriarch and knowing that behind the curtain he had been calling me broken for years. I was afraid that I would see it now. Every smile, every joke, every warm moment with Greg or the grandkids. I would see it all through the lens of what Mara had told me, and the seeing would be unbearable. Dr. Weiss did not tell me to go or not go. She asked me what I needed. I did not know the answer, but I knew that not going would become the story. Lucy is pulling away. Lucy is being difficult. Lucy can't handle a simple family dinner. My mother would deploy that narrative like a fleet, and by Easter, I would be the one who ruined things, not the one who had been ruined. So I went. Marcella's was warm and crowded. Red tablecloths, candles and glass holders, bread baskets on every table. The smell of garlic and butter and wine. The kind of restaurant where the walls are covered in framed photos of the owners with minor local celebrities, and there is always a Frank Sinatra song coming from somewhere you cannot identify. My father was already seated at the head of the long table they had pushed together for our group. He was wearing a blue button-down I had seen 100 times. He looked good. That was the difficult thing about my father. He looked like a man you would trust. Strong jaw, clean shave, warm eyes when he wanted them to be warm. He looked like someone's good father, and maybe he was, just not mine. He stood when I arrived. "Lucy, glad you could make it." He hugged me. A real hug, both arms. I let him, and I hated that part of me still wanted it to mean something. I sat between April and Aunt Patrice. Greg was across from me, helping their daughter Emma color on the back of a kid's menu. My mother was next to my father, glowing, touching his arm, laughing at his jokes. She had been married to this man for 38 years, and she was still performing the role of delighted wife with the precision of someone who had never considered the alternative. The dinner was fine. Normal. My father told stories about when they were young, how he almost missed their first date because his truck broke down on Broad Street, how my mother made him wait 3 months before she let him meet her parents. Everyone laughed. He was charming. He was warm. He asked Greg about work. He asked April about Emma's preschool. He called the waiter by name because they had been coming here for 20 years. He asked me how work was going. First time in months. I told him it was good, that we had gotten a new grant for the housing program. He nodded. He seemed genuinely interested for about 15 seconds, and then his attention drifted back to Emma, who was showing him a crayon drawing of a dog. I watched him for 2 hours. I watched the way he leaned into his family, the family he was proud of, the one that fit the story he wanted to tell. April with her husband and her daughter and her house in Dublin. Greg with his steady job and his firm handshake. Emma with her crayon dog and her complete, ordinary childhood. That was his family. That was the toast he wanted to give. I was the footnote. The ellipsis at the end of the sentence. I waited for his toast. He always made a toast. Every anniversary, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every New Year's. It was his ritual, his stage. But tonight, he did not stand. He did not raise his glass. He did not perform. April noticed. She leaned over to me. "Is Dad not doing a toast?" I looked at our father. He was wiping Emma's hands with a napkin, talking to Greg about a football game. He was not going to toast. He was not going to risk it. Not after New Year's. Not with me sitting right there, watching. The absence of the toast was louder than any words he could have said. He knew what he had done. He just did not think it was wrong. He thought the problem was that I had heard it, not that he had said it. Dinner ended. Hugs in the parking lot, My mother kissed my cheek. "I'm so glad you came, sweetheart. See? This is what family is about." I smiled. I let her have it. But as I walked to my car, I made a decision that I had been circling for 3 weeks. I was going to go back to my parents' house tonight. I was going to sit in that kitchen, and I was going to tell my father exactly what I knew. I followed my parents' car back to their house. My mother thought I was coming in to help clean up the morning dishes, which was a reasonable assumption because that was what I always did. The good daughter, the useful one. The one who showed up and washed things and carried things and made herself small enough to fit into whatever space they left for me. The house was quiet when we got in. My mother headed upstairs to change. My father went into the kitchen and started running water in the sink, rinsing out a travel mug he had used that morning. The kitchen was the same kitchen it had always been. Yellow walls, white cabinets, a window above the sink that looked out onto the backyard where a rusted swing set still stood from when April and I were kids. The light above the stove was on, casting everything in that warm orange glow that made the room look like a painting of someone's happy family. I stood in the doorway. My coat was still on. My keys were in my pocket. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingers. "Dad." He looked up from the sink. "Yeah, Luce? I need to talk to you about something." He turned off the water, dried his hands on the dish towel that hung from the oven handle, the one with roosters on it that my mother had bought at a craft fair years ago. He leaned against the counter and crossed his arms. Not hostile, just waiting. The way a man stands when he thinks the conversation is going to be short. "What's on your mind?" I took a breath. I did not sit down. I did not lean against anything. I stood in the doorway of my parents' kitchen and I looked at my father and I said the thing I had been carrying for weeks. "I know what you've been telling people about me." His face changed. Not a lot. A tightening around the jaw. A small shift in the eyes. The kind of change you only notice if you have spent 37 years studying someone's face for signs of weather. "What are you talking about?" "I know you've been telling Aunt Patrice and Uncle Richard that something is wrong with me. I know you've been calling me broken. I know you told them you don't know where you went wrong with me. I know you told them I'll end up alone and it'll be my own fault." Silence. The faucet dripped. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, my mother's footsteps crossed from the bedroom to the bathroom, and I could hear the water running through the ceiling. "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter who told me. It matters that you said it." He uncrossed his arms. He put one hand on the counter behind him. "Lucy, people talk. Families talk. I was just expressing concern." Concern doesn't sound like broken. Concern doesn't sound like you don't know what's wrong with me. Concern doesn't sound like telling your sister-in-law that your daughter will end up alone because of some defect you can't name. I never used the word defect. You used the word broken. Mara heard it. Patrice repeated it. You built a whole story about me and you gave it to every person in this family who would listen, and you never once said any of it to my face because that would have given me a chance to respond. He looked at the window above the sink. The backyard was dark. The swing set was a shadow against the fence. He stood there and he did not look at me, and he said the thing I already knew he would say because I had been waiting my whole life for this version of him. "I was worried about you, Lucy. That's what fathers do. They worry. Worry looks like asking me how I'm doing. Worry looks like listening when I talk about my life. Worry does not look like a campaign to convince your family that your daughter is defective because she doesn't have a husband at 37. You're being dramatic. You always do this. You take things and you twist them and you make everything bigger than it needs to be. I had a private conversation with your aunt. That's it. Multiple private conversations over years about how something is wrong with me." He looked at me then. His jaw was set. His eyes were flat in a way I had not seen before, or maybe in a way I had always seen but had chosen to call something else. Love. Intensity. Fatherly concern. I had run out of translations. "I'm your father, Lucy. I have a right to be worried about my daughter's life." "You have a right to worry. You don't have a right to shame me. Not in kitchens, not on phones, not in front of 30 people at New Year's." His mouth opened, closed. He turned back to the sink. He picked up the travel mug he had already rinsed and rinsed it again. The water ran over his hands and he stared at the dark window, and I stood there and I watched him choose not to meet me. He was not going to apologize. He was not going to acknowledge the hurt. He was going to stand at that sink and rinse that mug until I left, and then he was going to tell my mother that I was upset about nothing, and she would call me tomorrow and tell me he didn't mean it, and the whole machine would start turning again, except I was done feeding the machine. I'm not going to explain to you why what you did hurt me, Dad. You know, you knew when you didn't make a toast tonight. You knew when you couldn't look at me at the restaurant, you know. I turned around. I walked to the front door. I heard him turn off the faucet behind me. He did not follow. He did not call my name. He did not say, "Lucy, wait. I'm sorry. Let me try again." He let me leave the way he had always let me leave, with the assumption that I would come back. Because I always came back. Because that was what good daughters did. I closed the front door behind me softly. Not a slam. A click. The quietest possible ending to a conversation that had been 37 years in the making. I cried in the car. Not the polite crying I had perfected over the years, the kind with a tissue and a deep breath and a quick recovery before the next red light. This was the other kind. The kind that comes from somewhere below your ribs. The kind that makes your whole body shake. The kind that sounds ugly because it is ugly. Because grief does not care about presentation. I was not crying because my father had hurt me. I was crying because I had finally stopped pretending he had not. And there is a specific kind of pain that comes with that. The pain of admitting that the story you told yourself for 37 years was a story and not a truth. The man who taught me to ride a bike was also the man who called me broken. Both things were real. Neither one canceled the other. And I had to live in that. I drove home through Columbus with the heater blowing and the streetlights making patterns on the dashboard. I parked. I went inside. I changed into sweatpants and an old Ohio State sweatshirt, and I sat on the couch with the lights off, and I let the silence be what it was. My mother called the next day. I was at the grocery store, standing in the produce section, holding a bag of clementines, her name on my screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I picked up because some parts of you change slowly, and the part of me that answered when my mother called was older than the part of me that had walked out of that kitchen. "Your father is very upset, Lucy." "I know. He didn't sleep last night. He sat in his chair until 3 a.m. I had to bring him a blanket." I put the clementines in my cart. I looked at the avocados. I pressed my thumb into one gently to check the ripeness. "I'm sorry he's upset, Mom, but I'm not sorry for what I said." "You attacked him, Lucy. In his own home. After his anniversary dinner. He didn't deserve that. He told people I was broken, Mom. For years. He told Aunt Patrice that something is wrong with me. He told her I'll end up alone and it's my own fault. That's not worry. That's not concern. That's cruelty." Silence on the line. The grocery store hummed around me. Someone's cart had a squeaky wheel. A child was asking for fruit snacks in the next aisle. "Families talk, Lucy. Your father has a right to express his feelings to his sister-in-law." "Do I have a right to express mine to him?" "Not like that. Not on his anniversary." "When then? When is the right time to tell your father that his words have been following you around like a scar you didn't know you had?" "I think you're making this bigger than it is." And there it was. The same sentence, almost word for word, that my father had used. The same deflection. The same reduction. My mother was not his translator. She was his co-author. She had been writing the same story he had. The one where my feelings were too large and their behavior was just normal. And the whole problem was my inability to understand how families worked. "Mom, I love you. I'm not trying to punish anyone, but I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear what I heard. And I'm not going to keep showing up and smiling and washing dishes while the people I love talk about me like I'm a problem they can't solve. Lucy, I need some space. I'll call you when I'm ready." I hung up. I stood in the produce section and I held the phone against my leg and I breathed. In and out, in and out. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, and I was standing between the bananas and the bagged salads, and I was holding a boundary, and it felt like standing on a ledge and also like stepping off one. That Thursday, I went to Dr. Weiss. I sat in her office, the one with the gray couch and the small plant on the windowsill that always looked like it needed water, and I told her everything. The confrontation, his deflection, her deflection, the rinsing of the mug, the soft click of the door. She listened the way I listen to my clients, with her whole body, leaning slightly forward, not interrupting. "What do you want now?" she asked when I was finished. "I want to stop being the person who makes everyone else's cruelty make sense." She nodded. "That's a big change." "I know. It means losing some things." "I know that too." I told Dana the full truth that weekend. Not the edited version, not the funny version with the voice and the shrug, all of it. Mara's kitchen, the word broken, the campaign, the confrontation, the mug, the click. Dana sat on my couch and she held my hand and she did not try to fix it. She just kept saying, "I'm here." And that was enough. It was more than enough. It was the first time in weeks that someone's words meant exactly what they sounded like. I changed my plans for Easter. I would not be going to my parents' house. I would not be carrying plates or washing dishes or wearing a new dress to prove I was fine. I texted my mother, "I won't be there for Easter this year. I need more time." She did not respond for 2 days. When she did, it was one sentence. "I hope you know what you're giving up." I put the phone down and I thought about what I was giving up. The good daughter title, the peacekeeper role, the Sunday dinners and the cranberry meatballs, and the sound of my father's voice filling the room. I was giving up the version of love that required me to be smaller and quieter and easier to manage. I was giving up the performance. What I was keeping was harder to name but easier to breathe in. February in Columbus is gray and cold and honest. No holiday decorations left to soften the edges. No parties to attend. Just bare trees and salt on the sidewalks, and the kind of quiet that either swallows you or steadies you. And I had decided to let it steady me. 6 weeks had passed since New Year's Eve. 3 weeks since I stood in my parents' kitchen and told my father I was done. I had a routine now. It was small and it was mine. Therapy with Dr. Weiss on Thursdays. Dinner with Dana on Saturday nights, usually at the Thai place on Neal Avenue where the pad CEW was too spicy, and we always ordered it anyway. Sunday morning runs along the Scioto River, early, when the path was mostly empty and the water was flat and the only sound was my breath and my shoes on the asphalt. I had started cooking real dinners during the week. Not cereal over the sink. Not takeout eaten standing in the kitchen with my coat still on. Actual meals, with vegetables and a cutting board and a pan I had to wash afterward. It was a small thing, but it was the kind of small thing that meant something when you had spent years treating your own life like a waiting room for the real one to begin. April called me the last week of January. I had not spoken to her since the anniversary dinner. The call was tentative, like she was testing ice. "I heard about what happened. Mom told me. She's pretty upset." "I know. She says you attacked Dad." I told him what I knew, about the things he said to Aunt Patrice, about calling me broken. I told him and he couldn't apologize and I left. A long pause. "He really said that? Broken?" "Multiple times. Over years. Mara confirmed it." Another pause. Longer. I could hear Emma in the background singing something about a caterpillar. "I didn't know, Lucy. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you." "Are you okay?" "I'm getting there." We talked for an hour. April did not take sides. She did not defend our father or condemn him. She listened. She asked questions. She told me about a time he had compared her parenting to our mother's and how it had stung and how she had let it go, because that was what they did in this family. They let things go. They absorbed, they translated. "Maybe we all need to stop translating," she offered quietly. "Maybe." It was the most honest conversation I had ever had with my sister, and it happened because I had stopped performing. I had stopped being the easier version of myself, the one who laughed things off and said it's fine and made everyone else comfortable. I was messy and hurt and uncertain, and my sister met me there anyway. My father had not called. Not once. Not a text. Not a voicemail. My mother sent occasional messages, photos of Emma, a recipe she thought I would like, small, careful offerings that felt like someone sliding notes under a closed door. I responded briefly and kindly. I did not reopen the door. On a Tuesday night in the second week of February, I stood in my kitchen and I cooked salmon. I seasoned it with lemon and dill, and I roasted asparagus, and I set a place at my small table by the window. I poured a glass of white wine, the same kind I had barely touched at my father's house on New Year's Eve. I sat down and I looked at the plate and the glass and the single-place setting, and I did not feel the thing I used to feel when I ate alone. I did not feel like evidence of someone's failure. I felt like a woman having dinner in her own apartment in a city she had chosen, with the job she had built, and a life that did not need to be explained or defended or apologized for to anyone, including the man who had spent years telling people she was not enough. My phone buzzed on the counter. I set my fork down and I looked at the screen. Dad. One word. His name. The first time it had appeared on my phone in weeks. I did not know if he was calling to apologize or to argue or to pretend nothing had happened. I did not know if he was calling because he missed me or because my mother had finally convinced him to try. I looked at his name on the screen for a long time. The phone buzzed and buzzed. The kitchen was warm. The salmon was still hot. The wine caught the light from the overhead lamp and glowed pale gold. I picked up the phone and I set it face down on the counter. The buzzing stopped. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of the salmon. I chewed slowly. I looked out the window at the dark February sky and the lights of the apartments across the street. Other windows, other kitchens, other people eating dinner on a Tuesday, and I raised my glass. I did not say anything out loud. There was no one to hear it and no one to perform it for. But inside, in the quiet, private place where I had finally stopped apologizing for who I was, I made a toast. To 37. To eating alone without shame. To the woman who washed the dishes and carried the plates and smiled at the jokes and absorbed the blows and translated the cruelty and finally stopped. I set the glass down. I finished my dinner. I washed my own plate. And that was enough.